Welcome to the Lost Signals Reviews, the American Film Institute's Top 100, where we critique the supposed 100 greatest American movies of all time. Join us as we decide if they're worthy of the Mott's Top 100.
Or Mott's.
Hello and welcome back to the Lost Signals Reviews, the AFI Top 100. Today we are doing the number 48 movie on the list, Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. And I am Steve, or mostly your host, joined today by Rich Perry.
What's up?
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Hello?
And Scott Thurlow.
I see you.
It's terrifying. So I'm going to throw it over to Ian real quickly for the funny log line here.
I would have gotten away with it, too, if it weren't for you meddling employers.
Slash
Damn
Jimmy
you.
Stewart. Yes.
Perfect. So, Rich, why don't you tell us about what the plot of this movie is?
All right. Well, we have JB waiting for he's got a week left until his leg heals from some accident that's never disclosed.
No, he was on a race car course or something.
He got hit by a race car, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
They
I
did
missed that.
Like,
Awesome
you see the great picture in the beginning,
that was
and I think
him
he
getting hit?
took that picture.
That was him
Yeah,
taking the
yeah.
picture
And
as he was getting
they
hit.
reference it later on in that, too. Like one line that
Oh, God.
tossed out, but that is
Little
what happened.
throwaway line there.
Anyway.
So, in a harrowing race car accident, the photo of which he has framed in his apartment,
Mhm.
he takes to watching his neighbors go about their days to help pass the time when he happens upon one of his neighbors possibly murdering his wife and hiding the remains in his garden.
Acting suspiciously.
Yeah, so he gathers his girlfriend and his insurance nurse as his team to help him, to be his legs, to help him uncover this mystery. And gets his buddy, who's a private eye, involved. And hilarity ensues. You never really know whether or not he's guilty up until the end, where he just gives himself up.
Where he definitely is guilty.
He reveals himself as such, sure.
Yeah,
that's,
that's
pretty much it.
pretty apt.
Sure. So we were discussing a bit precast that I'm looking at a 2, and I will tell you why. It's perfectly fine. Like, it's a good framework, but a lot of this movie is going to be other questions we have coming up. I think is a lot of the strength of the movie.
I love the romantic comedy angle of this. I love the charm.
I don't know if I love it, but it's fine. Sure.
That's why I didn't say we. I said I.
Fair enough.
And I'm not a huge fan of Jimmy Stewart, but I think he does a great job here. The thing is, you're absolutely right. The actual narrative plot is a fairly simple story that's becomes greater because of all of the little elements and characterizations in this. The thing I might have to get full credit for is the fact that Hitchcock and the story really leaves you guessing, as Rich brought up in his description, until the very end. And like, I didn't know how. Actually, we stopped for a smoke break, and Steve-O, you mentioned that you saw this movie a while back. And
I actually have never seen it before.
You've seen a lot, then you saw a lot of references to this,
right?
And you didn't know how this was going to end up. And I saw this when I was in high school, perhaps. I didn't remember the plot. I kind of thought I did, but it left me guessing, even with my memory. So again, narratively a 2, but perhaps a 3. Guys, can you convince me?
I could be convinced as well, so go ahead.
Well, I think I'm going to, at this point in my thinking of it, I'm going to give it a 3. The story really hangs together really well, in my opinion. And I didn't think it dragged ever, which is a big thing for me. Like, the genesis of this question was intra-body conclusion, and we've kind of pulled all that into plot, but that kind of that kind of tells me where I should be going with my answers about this. That's kind of what I think about
Sure.
at first. You know, like, now I kind of broaden the way that I think about this question. But in terms of this movie, the introduction was good, the body was good, the conclusion was good. I wasn't bored, and like I think that the plot of it hangs together really well. It's not the most. It's interesting because I feel like Hitchcock is somewhat known for having like more complicated plots. And,
I see what you mean.
This is a pretty straightforward like whodunit. But like it's interesting that the entire time I was watching this, I was kind of expecting a reversal of what was expected. I expected the guy not to have murdered his wife.
Yeah.
Because you've seen so many things that are like riffing off of this movie since it came out that, do that. And like, I feel like that's what a lot of people were expecting when they watched the movie. And the fact that it's not that is almost like a reverse flipping the idea of it on its head.
In a sense,
which I like in terms of that. I didn't... Well, I guess I already said this, but I didn't find any part of it slow, and like I just enjoyed where the plot went, and I liked having this view, obviously for the same reasons that Jimmy Stewart liked it in the movie, or Jeff liked it in the movie, is like I liked having this view of like everybody, and like it's weird. There was only one apartment that was really the crux of the movie, but everyone was important, and I liked how they did that, and like they made that part of the plot of everything, and like the how the movie kind of
comes together,
went through its progression. So,
yeah, I was on the fence on whether I was going to give it a 2 or 3, but during the body, it didn't. I won't say it dragged for me. There were points where my interest started to wane, simply because like I was waiting for it to be the reveal that like the guy wasn't the didn't kill his wife. So like when they would drag out like all of these like leaps that him and Lisa would make, I was like, all right, you guys can kind of cut this. Like I'm not really invested. But then he would like, it was almost like he kind of knew that I wasn't invested. He'd like throw in like Miss Lonely Heart or like another shot of the newlyweds and that poor husband trying to
satisfy his wife,
trying to keep up. Sure.
Trying to satisfy his wife and like trying not to die of dehydration or
heart attack or something.
Or slip disc.
Leaning out the window, smoking a cigarette.
He gets 2 puffs and then he's called back. It's
he's like, fine.
I love that the only thing that could literally stop them from having sex was a murder.
Dog murder.
Yeah.
So what I actually think I appreciate the most about this film is you do get kind of more of a look at the private lives of all these people. I wouldn't say like omnipresent look at it, but you get a very voyeuristic look. But you never have any more information than Jimmy Stewart has. And he doesn't have much information himself. He has a glimpse and he's making judgment leaps, as you brought out, Rich. And then I'm kind of buying in on this, and then someone comes in and it's like, no, you're being irrational. You're trying to find
you're reading into
causality and plot where there's no grander scope.
Especially when Doyle comes in and he's like he's like pretty much shooting down all of his suggestions with questions that I had already come up with in my mind. Like every time it's just like, oh, like he's got a saw. I was like, I don't know, man. Like he's just wrapping it up in paper. Like he could be bringing it off to like help a friend. I don't know, soft furniture. I don't know.
Wait, what?
I don't know.
What? Soft furniture?
Well, here's the thing: is if you see someone carrying a sledgehammer down the road, like you might think, "Oh, this guy's up to no good," but he might be doing completely innocently. The thing is, if you're stuck in a house with only like looking out your window, you might see the worst than everyone out of sheer boredom.
And like I've never seen this movie before, but I've like through pop culture is osmosis. Like I know the gist of it. I thought it would take longer for him to like leap to, oh man, he's a murderer.
Yeah.
But it was pretty much immediately after watching him go out into the rain a couple times. It's like, nope, he murdered his wife. He murdered his wife. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, so I don't know, like, you mentioned something, Steve-O, that I, in fact, I would say, if we're cutting up the intro like I was used to, early on, I felt it was slow. Yes, this whole movie is a slower burn, sure, but it was slower than I would have liked it to have been. So, like, that's a personal kind of thing for me, yes. And I did, like, as I alluded to, Sash interrupted E earlier, like, I'm not as enthralled with the romantic sort of plot elements. They're fine, they don't do it as much for me. I don't find it as charming as you seem to.
Sure.
But I just thought, like, it took a little bit more to get to, like, the actual, like, core mystery, if you will, in a sense.
But I don't think it's. I think. Yeah, I get where you're coming from with that, but I think it's a mistake to come in thinking this is a thriller.
That's fair. Sure.
It's not. It's more about being bored. It's
trying to
that
invent
old
stories.
woman
Yeah.
looking out her window and seeing cars parked across the street and being like, "I wonder if
What they're up
there's
to.
drug dealers." And
That
like,
old Jimmy Stewart looking
Yeah.
out his window.
No, I get that. I see it. Yeah.
And I think the idea of inner paranoia versus like outer paranoia is the crux of this movie. Again, if that's not if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work. I'm not saying that you're
Sure.
wrong for feeling that. It's just that I don't know. To me, I would actually have almost preferred it that the guy didn't turn out to do anything, and it was just a kind of just bored socialite.
Well, I mean, and it's like,
I wanted that
they
to happen.
definitely made that movie, you know?
I wanted that to happen. I wanted Lisa to like end up in jail. As like a final, like, oh man, I went too far this time.
Yeah.
No, I get it, but sure. So certainly the paranoia thing is, I think I'm going to speak about it in a second, but I think I'm still sticking with a very solid 2, but just not quite enough for a 3, although I totally understand and can see why you guys probably are going to give it a 3 to plot.
Understandable.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3, and I'll probably elaborate more on that in supporting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with a 3 as well.
I feel you.
8?
It's close. I get you.
I'm going to give it a 3 because, again, I like the handling of the so-and-so mystery and what you know about it.
All right then. Sounds good. So we got 3 3s and a 2 for that. Ian, why don't you go on with the themes?
I'm going to start off with the low-hanging fruit, voyeurism. The thing is, like, looking into... Again, going back to what I was saying, the idea of looking into people's lives and only having half the information on it.
Snippets of them, yeah.
Jumping to conclusions. Granted, that's there, and I think that's what a lot of... basically what people use when they're referencing this film. They do the voyeurism angle. I actually think you're taking Jimmy Stewart's character, who is at a crux in his life of whether he wants to get married or not. He's literally stuck in the household, looking out at all of these people in different stages of relationships. And he sees the happy married, he sees the lonely heart, he sees the newlyweds and their passion. And you're seeing, like, and he's seeing all the stages and trying to come up with whether he wants to settle down with Grace Kelly's character or not. And I think that's, again, if I view this as a rom-com, oddly enough. I don't think Hitchcock is known for that. But I think it's very much about this couple finding love through solving a murder. They both find that kind of satisfaction in a more adventurous life. And I think it ends up working out well for them.
Yeah, because it answers like the one big hang up that he had was whether or not either one of them could change.
Whether she could hang.
Well, yeah. Well, it goes like both ways with that. Like, whether he could change to fit her world or her to change and fit his. And I think they found their happy medium with this whole.
And in the end, Jimmy Stewart couldn't hang.
That's true.
No, he couldn't.
He could not hang.
He was dropped. Sure. Yeah.
Why would you shoot the man that's keeping him on the fucking ledge?
He didn't even shoot him, though. He got the gun and he was like, nah.
Actually, that's a good point I wanted to bring up and I forgot about, is that I like how no one is particularly competent in this. It's actually very realistic. Like, it's a couple...
Even the lieutenant himself was like, eh.
The lieutenant was very much how I believe a police officer would view this. Like, you're trapped in this house.
Okay, pal. Yeah.
You don't have any proof. You just, like, the stuff you're seeing through the window. Like, just calm down. And they have to go to... even the killer himself isn't particularly adept. It feels...
That was the ballsiest move, to kill his wife in the middle of a crowded area.
Yeah.
So, again, I think
take her on suitcases.
this handles its themes really well. An actual exploration of romance
on many fronts. Yeah.
I would agree. I like that angle. Like he's seeing all these people in different stages of like romance or not romance in the case
just
of
relationships,
like Lonely Hearts,
in general.
Miss Lonely Hearts, or Miss Torso,
who he thinks is single,
but actually ends up having a boyfriend who looks like Rick Moranis from
who's been
who's
away
in
at
the
war.
military, yeah. And but I also wanted to mention the first thing that you brought up is like the voyeurism things. I think it's a statement on people at large, like, and how they view society, like the little glimpses that you get of like other people's lives. It's actually a really apt statement on the state of things now.
I agree with that.
Maybe even more so than then. Like you see, like maybe on social media, you see like all the people, like you see these just what people are willing to show you through their like open windows, like of their lives, and I think that it's kind of brilliant in that regard. I'm definitely going to give Themes a 1 for sure.
No, I pretty much agree, and I don't have much to add, but I do think that it's all very well handled. Obviously, I was going to bring up the paranoia aspect, which I think is really well, again, like you said, the inner versus the outer sort of like nature of it.
Right. And
yeah, like if you're just bored enough, then as you point out, when Doyle detective comes over, he's like, I believe you saw something or what you thought you saw, but So yeah, it's all like you said, the modern relationship angle, like him viewing like snippets or stages of relationships, and as applied to his own circumstance. Yeah, it's all nicely, seamlessly integrated there. So I got to give it a 1.
I dig it. All right, 1's all around.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay, sounds good. Scott, why don't you talk to us about the antagonists?
Okay, so 2 ways I guess you can cut it up. Lars Thorwald, whatever, the actual like the guy who murders his wife and goes about his little plan to get away with it, perhaps, and then doesn't. Like, but the thing is, like, it's weird because he sort of is and isn't antagonizing Jimmy Stewart, who we assume to be the protagonist, I would think, right? And it also ties into what I just said, like your own boredom / possible paranoia / again trying to figure out what you're going to do in your life when you have nothing to do but literally observe people like all day, every day. So, like, certainly, Jeff was struggling with both of those things to some degree, I would say, at once. And I think it comes through. I just don't know, like, what do you think? What do you guys think, like, should be the actual antagonist? I'm probably giving it a 1, like, maybe combined from, like, sort of amorphously those elements, because I think they were effective to an extent each way, but I don't think I can't point to any one single thing, or character even again, the murderer himself, and say he was, like,
because
solely antagonistic force, so.
Yeah, he didn't become an antagonistic force until the very end of the movie.
Exactly, right. So.
But I guess turned out that he was an actual murderer.
Yeah,
so
he was the killer. Sure, he did it. I get it, but
I guess like all the everything that happened that like pretty much antagonized the characters or worried them enough to be proactive are things that turned out to be true. So I guess he kind of does count.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, to an extent, but not like fully. Like, at least definitely not till the last 10% of the movie or so.
Well, I mean, by doing nothing, he was more of an antagonist than when he actually became an antagonist at the end, or by being more proactive.
Yeah, that's kind of funny, but a good point.
I can't really count him as a good antagonist. I don't think. I'm trying to wrap my mind around what the real antagonist of this movie is like, just like I keep coming back to like, maybe it's like boredom and like,
that's what I was saying.
But that's not it really either, because that doesn't antagonize him in any way. It actually compels him to fucking solve a murder. So that's not really an antagonist, I don't think.
Marriage is the antagonist.
I was waiting for someone to humorously bring that up.
It's not that either. Like, yeah, I get if that's a joke, but like, it's not that either. Like, I don't know if there is a good antagonist for the movie. I might give this a 0. I mean, I guess for the most part, he's his own greatest antagonist, right? He drives himself.
Yeah, like I said, the paranoia and the boredom, I think all combined.
At that point, it becomes his broken leg, which is the antagonist.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now he's got 2 of them for the sequel.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I can give this a 1. I would like to give this movie a perfect score, to be honest, because I really like it a lot. But like, I don't know if I can give it.
This is one of those weird situations where I don't think this would have been a better movie with a stronger antagonist.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah,
I think that it does what it does with what it has. I think I have to give antagonist a 0 because I don't think there's anything that's like super antagonizing him other than his own. Like maybe it's his own like desire to understand what's going on with everybody to an extent.
Could we say voyeurism is the antagonist?
But like all of these things turn out to be like positive things, right? He ends up.
Or he was right about them.
Voyeurism is always a positive thing.
If you say so.
We do not approve voyeurism on the Lost Signals.
Well, Ian might, but I don't. But no, like that's what I'm saying. Like I see what you're saying there. Like that's why I'm picking like sort of elements from each of like a possible category that falls under a possible antagonist and giving them enough credit on collectively to give it a 1. But I totally see your point. I see why you might not.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I think I'm going to give this a 0 unless somebody pulls out a last second argument against.
You just heard my argument, so I'm giving it a 1, sort of like. But I can see switching places, but I'm still sticking with a 1 for me.
With a 1. E, what are you giving it?
I think I agree with you on that. I was initially going to come in with a 1 for this, but it's one of those cases again.
Yeah,
this wouldn't benefit, but it's
for what's there. It's just not enough for you guys. I get that. Yeah,
it's what's on. Yeah, it's what's on the page. It's what's on the screen.
Give it a 0.
All right. Scott, you're sticking with a 1 right of this, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right, and it's on to me with protagonists, and it's it's Jeffries, Jimmy Stewart in his best role. I think.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
And he does the actor Jimmy Stewart does a great role in this movie, or does a great job in this movie, and B, his character is really well drawn, and like it's really interesting seeing him go through, like watching all these people day after day, going through like his daily routine with him. Like you're basically stuck with him. I was talking about this earlier. It's like almost like Phone Booth, that Colin Farrell movie. If anybody saw that,
yeah, I did. It's okay.
Where you're just stuck in one location for the entire movie, and you kind of just get into the head of this character.
You live there.
Now, granted, Rear Window is much better than Phone Booth in terms of movies. Let me just go on the record saying that.
Just to be clear.
It's really interesting seeing him progress almost into like, he goes from this photographer who's got a broken leg and he's just like hanging out, like watching all the people across the way, and like he like almost goes in this like spiral of just paranoia, and then
conspiracy,
and then it turns out that his paranoia
right.
is actually correct, and like you see him come out of the spiral, and it's a really well drawn character, and I guess I'm gonna Grace Kelly's character Lisa and who's that Stella the nurse are almost like secondary,
they approach it
like protagonists as well, but I think I'm gonna leave them for supporting characters. But
Lisa's definitely a strong candidate for secondary protagonist.
Yeah, but I really like what Jimmy Stewart does with this role, and I really like just how the character is drawn in the script. So,
well, as I established, I believe this is a Hitchcock romantic comedy.
All right.
I do consider Lisa, however to pronounce it in this, to be the secondary protagonist. Now, granted, of course, Jimmy Stewart is the driving force for this film. It's interesting watching him go through cabin fever.
Yeah,
sure.
But what I really like, and the reason I conclude the two, is that, I mean, she starts off more in love with him than he is with her. But you see her, but she wants love on her terms, and they both want love on their own terms.
Exactly.
And to watch them actually fall in love together, including like the little small things where towards the end of the movie he is addressing her differently than in the start of they're using pet names, things like that, and just their interaction grows throughout this entire thing until it reaches the ending, which obviously that their relationship is much stronger at the end of this than in the beginning.
And they've come to some kind of
very
compromise.
strong one.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much agree. Like, that's really well said. A lot of that, as you mentioned, Steve-O, it certainly is, I think, the best Jimmy Stewart film, and his character has a great arc. There's a lot of robustness to him, like his traits and so forth. And I do think that I am on board as well as elevating Lisa to being pretty much a secondary protagonist. Like, she's above a secondary character, but not quite like a protagonist,
Sure.
but she's there enough, and she contributes a lot as well. And she's very well fleshed out. Like you said, like maybe their relationship could be like possibly the protagonist. In a sense. But regardless, I'm still giving it a 1, and I'm giving her a lot of credit alongside Jimmy / Jeffries as well, because of all the things we just said. So
Jim Jeffries.
Yeah, Jim Jeffries.
Give it a 1.
Yeah.
I can't really add anything more.
I guess I will elevate her as well. And one last thing, since I didn't really talk about her at all. I loved her progression throughout this film from
exactly
her complete not believing him at all at first into full on diving headfirst into this
and having her own theories and her own
that they're getting into. I love that,
and going above and beyond what he wants her to do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Jumping
into the window, breaking into a guy's house.
Heels.
Yeah, and a dress.
In
Yeah,
heels.
pretty impressive.
Once again, Lost Signals does not condone breaking into anybody's house. Anyway,
Unless you're trying to catch a murderer.
Unless you suspect your neighbor of being a murderer, then.
Or if you're in love with Jimmy Stewart, whatever.
Anyway,
so that's ones all across the board for protagonists. Rich, why don't you tell us what you think of the supporting characters?
Giving it a 1. Here's why.
Go on.
Every single apartment that was shown in this movie has its own beginning, middle, and end story. They're as TV tropes are called, the heroes of another story.
Yeah.
Like you see the initial, everybody gets an intro alongside Jimmy Stewart's character's intro, where you see the starts of their story, you see they're all their character quirks, and then you see when he starts to suspect Thorwald of murdering his wife, you see every other character start to hit their wall, where you have the songwriter who's who's having trouble coming up with a song. You have Miss Lonely Heart
eating dinner by herself.
Eating dinner by herself and reaching despair. You have Miss Torso beating off the suitors.
Whoa.
Wait.
Fighting.
Sorry.
Judge,
Fighting
phrasing?
off the suitors. You have the newlyweds.
She's rejecting their advances.
We'll
say yes.
You have the newlyweds, where the husband just can't seem to find that time to have his cigarette.
Too much sex.
Yeah,
sure. I mean, you're right. So
and then as soon as he finds his conclusion, or and then of course when everything hits the fan, where they're pretty much closing in on this guy and forcing him to get more and more erratic. You have everybody else have the culmination of their stories as well, up into the panning shot of all their conclusions finally coming together.
Yeah, Lonely Hearts and the musician.
Song,
yeah, sure.
No, chills.
Chills. I absolutely agree. I was going to give the apartment block itself.
Oh no.
Count that as secondary and give it a 1 because of everything you just said. So what do you got to eat?
Sorry.
So I have 2 segments I want to talk about,
Okay.
which is 1, the dog dying. Speaking of the apartment block, it's the fire escape couple. When their dog dies, the woman gives a speech being we're all neighbors, we're kind of family, and we're all stuck in our own little worlds. We don't care about anyone else. And I love the party at the
musician guys.
Musicians, they hear this and then
right
go
back to party.
Yeah.
But I think this perhaps might have Hitchcock's most tragic scene in it, which is Miss Lonely Heart having dinner by herself. It's blocked incredibly well. It is heartbreaking to watch. And her entire story, until the very end, where you get that glimmer of hope, is
It's pretty dark.
one
yeah.
of the like.
She's
I'm
about to off
watching-
herself.
Yeah, I'm watching Jimmy Stewart and friends bumble around trying to solve this murder that might not be at this point,
and basically ignore her.
Yeah, they see her about.
So the nerd, like Stella calls it out. She's just like, oh, I know what those pills are for.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, let's continue these theories.
We got our plot to deal with. Let's go.
Yeah.
It is like her storyline is perhaps one of the most tragic things I've seen in Hitchcock, if not in many other films. For all of that, I give it perhaps the strongest one of this work.
It's one of and I will agree. There's only one character we didn't mention, or at least not here yet, is Doyle, and he was fine. Like you said,
Right.
he does a good cop. Like he does what you should do, but he also he's effective enough, at least at the end as well.
He's the rational voice.
Yes,
in this
in
irrational
an
story.
irrational world.
sort of. But yeah, no,
If you will.
because he's like the outsider in a sense. Like he doesn't live there, so
I
he
love
only
how-
has the information that people and Jimmy Stewart's telling him. But I still think he did a good job as well for his character.
I love how Lisa and Jeffries just write
And
him
Stella.
off. Yeah, write him off
Even though
at
he's
one
like
point.
saved his ass in Nam.
Yeah, technically,
Or
whatever war it was. Nam hasn't happened yet, but yeah.
I know.
But I do want to give Stella credit too, because I thought she was a strong supporting character.
Oh yeah, definitely.
If not part of their cadre, but either
I
way.
was actually surprised by how integral
she
her
was
character
badass
was
as well.
this started
Yeah.
going along.
She was completely badass.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll agree with most of what you guys have said.
I would love a sequel with the three of them in their own private detective agency.
As like a Scooby-Doo troop.
Yeah.
As we alluded to, sure.
It's the fucking sequel to and
The Rear Windowers, but anyway.
yeah. Anyway, I loved all these supporting characters, and like you hit the nail right on the head, Rich, and something that I probably wouldn't have said myself, but you're absolutely right when you say that each one of these characters that you get to see have their own story going on, and it's fascinating. And this probably goes into style a little bit, but
I was going to say
it's
that. yeah.
fascinating that they're all told without dialogue.
Exactly.
And that's the mark of a great visual storyteller, and which Alfred Hitchcock obviously very much is. And I don't know, I just love that shit.
It's amazing that he gets you interested in all those stories because the main character is interested in all those stories.
Yeah.
Exactly. Everything. There's a great conflagration of storytelling in this movie that is just a bunch of different stories that are woven into one coherent thing.
Yep. Exactly.
And I love the way that it's told throughout this movie. Anyway,
For sure.
that's ones all across the board for that. For supporting, Ian, dialogue.
So, this is a pretty effective comedy. We're all laughing quite a bit throughout. And again, when you go in to Hitchcock, you're expecting psycho style dialogue,
Tension and stuff, yeah.
Heavily. I don't think there's much.
It's certainly different than the movies like that he did.
But there's one line.
What were you gonna say?
Again, to prove how incompetent almost all these characters are. Jimmy Stewart's girlfriend mentioned at one point, when the dog dies, oh, he's murdered. Perhaps the dog knew too much or something similar to that. And we all laughed,
Uproariously.
guffawing
Yes.
quite a bit at that. So I have to say, it was funny dialogue, and I think at worst it's serviceable, and it's at many points much better than that.
Exactly. I was going to say, I think it's more than serviceable for most of it. And yeah, there's some chuckles to be had, but there's also some serious stuff. For example, when Jeffries and Lisa are talking about the relationship and
I was about to bring that
getting
up.
into it, right?
Yeah.
And and even Stella's advice or in her input as well. So all that was really solid. So yeah, I'm giving it a pretty solid one for that overall. So good, Rich.
Yeah, the dialogue, pretty much Lisa's entire intro before she even stepped on screen was done through dialog
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
true.
give you a real look at who she was before stepping in.
When he's talking to
Yeah.
Stella.
Yes.
where he doesn't talk bad about her. I was expecting him to come up with reasons for why he didn't want to marry her. I don't know, like flaws in
She's
her
too
personality
perfect.
or anything. We're just like, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with her, and that's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. It's the dialogue's spot on. It's you know, it's not the greatest, you know, script that's ever been written by any means, but it is good.
It's damn
to
solid.
the point.
Yeah.
It's funny when it needs to be, or even sometimes when it doesn't need to be, and like you know, like that line about the dog. I think you can take it two ways. Like, I'm not sure if that was written to be like as uproariously funny as we all found it, but I kind of think it was.
I think it was a moment of levity
because the way they've been playing these characters, it's too stupid of a line to have snuck in there accidentally.
Yeah,
it was like they already established like how snarky they are too.
Well, I think it was absolutely written as a joke. My question is if it was written to make her character seem much more like sarcastic and like have this like weird wit to her, or if she's like, if it's supposed to be her character just saying something silly and like
it could be both. In a sense,
I don't think it can be both.
I think it can, like, but we don't have to get into it. But I think you can get either out of it.
If this were made today with a different director, they would have played these characters far goofier than they appeared down here.
Maybe,
but yeah. I think this is again played straight most of the time, with the jokes coming from the fact that they're relatively intelligent people who are
just don't have all the information.
Are bored too. Half the information and are pretty bored. But I just want to say that one last thing, which is I think Jimmy Stewart actually plays a pretty good dick. And I'm kind of surprised, but he usually plays like the good guy types.
Right.
Well, he was inadvertently a dick in Wonderful Life.
Here's the problem.
Of course,
Jimmy Stewart needed Keanu Reeves as agent, and then he'd be fine. He just picked a bunch of fucking boring ass movies early on in his career. Anyway,
but
not everybody agrees with me on that, but dialogue I think is getting all ones from us. Right?
I think so.
So let's move on to style, Scotty.
F&A, dude. So Hitchcock, man, like.
F&A indeed.
To tell you, like, it's I don't see how you can almost give Hitchcock any Hitchcock film a 0 to style, and certainly this one. And you guys brought up a lot of the points because it takes place in such a limited area. It's almost like not quite a stage play per se, but there's only one set, which is you seeing the apartments that he can see. Yeah. So, like, in that sense, it's claustrophobic because you feel like as if you're trapped in the apartment with him. But also, as one of you brought up, like the blocking of shots, like as he goes from one apartment, one window, if you will, to the next, to the next, to the next, and then he puts together pieces of information. All that was fucking amazing. Like when you were seeing through his again binocular vision or camera vision, if you will, everything. It was all perfectly seamlessly done. And I was going to say that some of the points that we mentioned, like that you get everyone's story, hit all his neighbors' stories via no dialogue, more or less, like via just visual. I think that's a big part of the style. So I'm giving it a very strong one. This might be the strongest point of this movie for our question for me.
Yeah, I think it's definitely up there. You know, it's Hitchcock. The style's gonna be great. There are a lot of great shots in this movie.
And the soundtrack as well. I'm sure you'll bring it up. But
absolutely, there's really good music throughout. You know, the mood of a Hitchcock movie is very obvious anytime you see one, and this film is no different. Like I said, it's the first time I saw it, but you can recognize certain things that Hitchcock does when he's directing, things like that. And, it's just a film that is going to feel, despite the fact that a lot of his films are very heavily riffed on and referenced in pop culture, there's something about them that makes them feel completely different than anything else out there. And, you know, it's just the way that he made movies, the way that he made film. He's really good. He had an eye for it. And, yeah, I mean, I can never take anything off of style, any Hitchcock movie that I've ever seen. So
exactly.
That's a very
This one's no exception.
I like a good tracking shot. In the intro, there were a couple really good ones.
True.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I have nothing else to add besides that.
Give it a 1.
All right.
Yep.
All right. One's all around for that. And recommend with me yes, if you haven't seen this movie, like I hadn't before tonight, go and watch it. You will be missing out on a large and interesting part of film history if you don't see this. And on top of that, it's just a fun, good movie to watch. You're going to get some laughs. There's good tension, especially towards the end of the film. And, just go check it out. It's Hitchcock. You can't really go wrong.
Yeah, so it's not my favorite Hitchcock film, but certainly it's still goddamn good. So yes, I'd still recommend it. I recommend other Hitchcock films above it, but I wouldn't never say skip it either. So that's pretty much my thoughts on it. Definitely, I recommend it.
All right.
If your girlfriend is saying, "Hey, let's watch a rom-com," grab this one.
Yes.
You won't regret it.
Good call.
Either this or Deadpool.
Watch them back to back.
But I think this is a really charming film. Oddly enough, this is perhaps one of my top Hitchcock films.
Fair enough.
But I mean,
certainly,
people have different tastes, and my taste is Rear Window.
All right.
Definitely recommend this. Like Steve-O, I had never seen it before, and it kept me guessing all the way into the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like any good mystery.
Yeah, and it still stands exactly. So I'm with you.
Well, Ian, would you like to give us your scores?
Sure, 9's 9.
999999999.
Nine's all around. All right. And I think that's pretty much right. Yeah, it's still strong. It stands. It doesn't lose anything, and that's sort of a credit to Hitchcock's vision and genius, because you can still watch this film today and get a lot out of it, and still says a lot, and it's still damn good.
And it's also, I'm grading this as a Hitchcock film.
Yeah.
Which means I'm grading it on very high standards.
Yeah.
And it still hits the standards.
I love this.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great movie. All right, so that's going to do it for us tonight. We have been reviewing Rear Window, and I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, here with Rich Perry.
Don't voyeur.
Ian Manzer.
Voyeur, if you suspect your neighbor, if you see something, say something.
And Scott Thurlow.
And I will, of course, be watching all of you. See you next time.
Good night.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.